Про цілі і про те, чи вони досяжні, вам розкаже засновник та головний редактор видання ArchDaily Девід Базульто. Ваші оплески. Просимо вімкнути гарнітуру нашому спікеру, бо його хочуть почути.
Hello. Thank you. I don't know what he said, but I saw that you all raised your hands, and I assume that it's because you know ArchDaily. Well, my name is David Basulto, and together with David Asael, this guy who's somewhere in the audience, we are the founders of ArchDaily, and I'm very excited to be here in Kyiv, my first time in Ukraine, because what I'm going to tell you about ArchDaily is a phenomenon that could only happen in a country such as Chile, that was going through a moment that I think is very similar to what is happening today in Kyiv, and I hope that this story can inspire you to do something. ArchDaily started in 2006 when we were two fresh graduates with long hair, with a lot of ideas, and with a big passion for the city. Today, we're more than 65 people working from 6 cities around the world. And the question, what is ArchDaily? For one side, it is a journey, because it has been to build a startup for architecture, but using tools that we as architects didn't knew that exist. It has been a journey in the sense that we had to face the unknown, to do many things that we were not prepared, and the internet is something that changes continuously. But always having this aspiration to have better cities has helped us find direction in this journey. And especially to do it from Chile, that is at the end of the world. But in a more practical way, ArchDaily today is the most visited source of information for architects in the world. It is visited by more than 500,000 people every day. And again, this is done from Chile. This doesn't come from Western Europe or from the US. And why this is possible? Because the architects, we are very special people, but we are trained in the same way, and we practice in the same way all around the world. This is the image of architect when you go into Wikipedia, and this could be an architect in Mumbai, in Santiago, in Kyiv. We all act and learn in the same way. So to approach the architect in a global way is possible. But also another important fact of the world that allows ArchDaily to exist is that cities today are our biggest talent. We are in this urban age in which this, which is perhaps the most wonderful creation of man, is at the same time our biggest talent. And for the architect, there is this. That is not only to be famous, to be in the cover of these magazines, it's not only a network of opportunities, but it is the way in which we share knowledge among architects. When you do something unique, something relevant, something that can inspire other architects, you can be in one of these publications, and what you have done will be shown to architects in very distant places. But when we started to do ArchDaily, this had a problem, because this was done in paper, this was physical, these were atoms, and this was produced in the architecture centers of the world. These magazines were done in Milan, in Boston, in London, in New York. And from there, they traveled to the periphery and to other countries. So it was a very centralized model that also involved a big cost, because you had to move this paper, these heavy things, from one side to the other, and it also involved a matter of time. So for me, I am a very geek architect, and I was always consuming information in my library or through subscriptions, and it had a very big cost, and it was very hard to do it, to create your own library of architectural information. And understanding this, then we said, the internet maybe can help us to change this model. In Chile, perhaps now you know that there is very good architecture done with very few resources and that has a very particular relation with the landscape that can be very inspiring. But the problem was that these architects who were doing very interesting work, they were not known to the world. What they were producing that could help others to be inspired, to learn new things, could not find its way from Chile to the world. Because, well, Chile, very isolated, and the only way to reach this would be that maybe some architect from Chile will go to do a postgrad study in one of these centers, and he could become like the correspondent from Chile to the world. But what if this architect didn't know about your projects? You had no chance to be there. These physical networks were very inefficient. So understanding that, we decided to apply a startup-like mindset to this problem, to transform this that is physical and also with a physical network into something online. And we start with this in Spanish, that Plataforma Arquitectura means architectural platform, to be an effective platform for others. And our goal was to create this place where we could generate not only exposure for the projects, but also discussion and hopefully transmit opportunities. Very abstract idea. And the interesting thing was that when we were discussing these issues, that providing architects with good information could help them do better work, sitting on a table, discussing about this, maybe we could do it with these free tools that the internet provides you, and we just started to do it. We reached out to the architects that we knew, our former schoolmates, or maybe our teachers who were doing interesting things, and we started to publish them online. And again, as I'm an architecture geek, we started to publish all these projects with a lot of detail, because the web is very flexible. You could put in one endless page a lot of diagrams, a lot of technical details that are very important, unlike the magazines who have the unit of the page that has a limited number. And the interesting thing was that how this started to grow, because again, we didn't have resources, so we couldn't invest in marketing or something like that. But architects start to tell other architects, hey, look, my work is here, and here you can find other projects in a very deep way. And very quickly, this started to go viral via email. We started with 10 visits one day, 100, 1,000, 5,000. And the most interesting thing was that architects also started to weave a network. They started to exchange information. It was not just in the magazines that it is very unidirectional. Here architects will be discussing about technical solutions. How did you solve that skylight? How did you do this concrete detail? And at the same time, more architects started to share their work with us. But what was very interesting was the day that we received an email from Habitare. And they asked us, hey, what is this, all this architecture that you are presenting? This is very fresh. What is happening in Chile? Do you know what is happening in Peru? And they started to find a new source of architectural information through us. And then we understood that we started to become like the online part of this publications network. But again, this was happening in Chile, that now you understand that it is at the end of the world. We are 10 hours away from everything that is happening here, but we're also very close to what is happening here in the global south. And for us, this was strange because Spain is the source of architectural publications. They have El Croquis, Arquitectura Viva, Tectónica. They have the knowledge, but they weren't doing this online. So for us, it was very strange that the online disruption was coming from here and not from here. And all of this was happening just because we liked to do it. It's not like we set up to do something like create a company, that what we were going to be doing in 5 more years. At that time was very instinctive, and we were very innocent. And we were just so looking at the things that were happening because of this. Until one day, I had the opportunity to go to Ecuador to do an interview with some architects. And at the end, I asked them the question that I had never done in an interview, that was, what has happened to you thanks for being exposed on ArchDaily? And these architects told me this. This is a very short video. It has English subtitles.
Si bien no es que seamos tan viejos, la verdad, nosotros no entramos en el internet como entran ahora los adolescentes que ya nacen enchufados al ciberespacio. Nosotros entramos, no me acuerdo, en el colegio internet nadie sabía para qué valía. Era una herramienta que nadie entendía para qué mismo valía, pero veías ahí cualquier pendejada, pero no entendías para qué valía. Entendí la magnitud del internet y el potencial en el momento que contacto con plataforma de arquitectura. Yo confiaba que la casa Pentimento podía ser mostrada estuve buscando medios de difusión. Primero, al no entender el potencial de la arquitectura, lo que hice es contactarme con editoriales. Obviamente ninguna me respondió. Después dije, bueno, ¿qué pasará con estas páginas? ¿Alguien le interesará? ¿Valdrá para algo? ¿Cómo funcionará? Me contacto con plataforma arquitectura, les interesa, envío todo el material, sale publicado. Y hay un antes y un después entre todo lo que ha sucedido. Es que esta cosa es abrumadora. Sale publicado y comienzan a escribir editoriales, comienzan de a poco a llegar invitaciones, tanto a José María en ese momento que trabajamos juntos, después que ya trabajamos ahora por separado, igual comienzan a llegar invitaciones por todo lado, que hacer clases, que hacer talleres, que a dar conferencias, y hay un tema ya extremo, o sea, de pronto escriben de China, quiero para un libro de casas, quiero la escuela para un libro de ni sé qué tema, nos llaman para... Es abrumador. Estábamos en Maracaibo y una de las personas de la oficina nos llama urgente, necesitamos material, piden material para una exposición en Abu Dhabi que se está armando sobre proyectos de entierre que hay en la casa entre muros, y claro, y eso no salió de la nada, salió de la difusión en plataforma arquitectura y a la vez de la difusión en ArchDaily, los dos medios que están difundiendo siempre. El nivel de penetración es tan brutal que tenemos ahorita, no sé, 15, 16, 17 publicaciones en espera que nos lleguen, que hemos enviado material, más todo lo que ya ha llegado antes. Y también ha hecho que cuando los proyectos llegan a un concurso, ya no son proyectos que parten de cero, ya son proyectos que la gente los conoce, y eso también ha sido positivo. Yo creo que, por ejemplo, un proyecto como la escuela, si bien es fuerte y todo lo que sea, sí le da peso que antes ya comenzó a rodar por los medios. Entonces los jurados, cuando ya ven un proyecto que comenzó a rodar por los medios, como que ya saben de qué va y no parten de cero. Eso también nos ha ayudado mucho. ¿Y qué más con plataformas? Nada, que claro, pues fueron un agradecimiento total, fueron los que primero creyeron en nosotros.
After hearing this story that started to repeat more and more with other architects across Latin America, we understood another change that we have done. It was not just that we were turning something offline into online, but it was also that we were changing how architecture was perceived. Because what these architects were doing was a very good work. This is the kind of architecture that you want to see more in cities, done with local materials, very low cost, no mechanical ventilation in the case of this equatorial climate. They weren't being featured by the publications because they didn't have good photos, because their work was not aesthetically pleasing, but on the other hand, it was a work that had a tremendous value for other architects. So, because for the print media, their business is to sell the cover, they could not accommodate this architecture that produces a tremendous value. As we were not focused on these aesthetics only, and we were more focused on to the craft or the technique or the impact of the architecture, we started to create a place for architecture that had no place in the traditional model. And this started to be a very big reference for architects in the world. Actually, these guys, they are called Al Borde. During that year, they won the best architecture detail of Detail magazine with that school that only cost $200, a project that perhaps wouldn't have been featured by any architecture magazine in the previous model. So then we understood that more than media or than a blog, what we were becoming was a hub of opportunities, a hub for architecture that will concentrate and make available a vast amount of knowledge and will attract all the ones who need access to it. But we had a barrier. We were doing this in Spanish, and we started to understand that through our metrics that a lot of people in Europe or in the US were reading us, even if we were in Spanish. And we started to wonder why. Why do you go to read a website in another language? It is because no one was doing it in English. All the major architecture websites were the websites for the magazines, and they cannot publish their content online because they sell magazines, so that will cannibalize their business model. So then we saw an opportunity, and we said, what if we start to do this in English? We write English in a good way, speaking is not so good, but This was a big step for us because, again, we were doing this from Chile, and I want to give you a bit of context about this. I told you that we're 10 hours away from all the major centers in the Northern Hemisphere, but we're also surrounded by the mountains, the eternal ice, the most dry desert in the world, and the Pacific Ocean. So it's like a bubble. Even if you see Latin America, you could say, maybe it's like Europe. Latin America is very fragmented. You do not travel too much, there's not so much relation. Like here, that for example, now you can travel with much more freedom in the European Union. For you, it's $20 to go in Ukrainian airlines to see another culture. Chile was very, very isolated. And the fact that the mountain goes all along the country, anywhere where you are in Chile, you see your limit. So Chileans think very inwards. They do not start companies that go abroad and so on. And at that moment, we started to see that perhaps there was a potential to do this for the world. And we're very innocent, and we said, what if we go out? What if instead of using this map that places us at the bottom, we just flip it mentally, and from Chile, we start to go out to the world. And that's when we said, well, architectural platform was a name that was too long, and we made the adjustment into ArchDaily, and we went to the world. We started to do the same, but in another language. And our goal was to become the biggest hub of opportunities for architects on the internet. We started to do this exchange of knowledge in English, and ArchDaily started to grow very fast because no one was doing it. Our growth was very exponential, and in 18 months, we became the most visited source for architects on the internet, which for us was amazing because at that time, we were 5 people working in a small office in Santiago. And over this time, we have accumulated a lot of information as a digital library with one-to-one knowledge transmission, with interviews with architects, tens of thousands of published projects. We're reaching to 30 million monthly visits, millions of page views, but also we're growing a very strong relation with the architects on social networks. This is very important for us because architects, for example, Instagram, we are very visually driven in terms of inspiration. And this is a platform where we as architects can capture the things that interest us the most. And why we put so much focus on this? Because if we do not adapt to the changes, the same that happened to the print magazine is going to happen to us. So every time that the internet, there is a change, a shift, we have to embrace it. We have to adapt very fast. Otherwise, we are going to disappear. And we continue to grow. And as I told you, we started in Spanish, then we went into English, but in 2011, we launched ArchDaily in Portuguese, then we launched ArchDaily for Mexico, and then in Chinese. And you may ask, why? Why do you took this direction? As I told you, ArchDaily has been a journey in which we have met many amazing architects, but perhaps the architect who has influenced us the most is this. The one on the right, he's Wang. Wang is a Chinese architect, a master in computer science, and at that time he was finishing his PhD in architecture. He's also the owner of a website called Art2Go, that what they do is take all the content of ArchDaily and they translate it into Chinese. So when we find this, we said, oh, we have a copycat. And with our Western conception of copyright, we started to send him emails, stop stealing our content. He never answered. Then we sent him legal notes, cease and desist notes. If you do not stop, we are going to take legal action. He never answered, and of course that we were not going to go to China to do a copyright lawsuit against someone. It's not possible. But we had the chance to go to Beijing for the Pritzker Prize ceremony for Wang Shu. The first time that we went there, and we sent him an email. Hey, Wang, we're going to Beijing, let's meet. In like 2 hours, he answered, okay, let's meet. And we sat down with him, and he showed us the software that he had done, in which he takes all the content from ArchDaily put this on a dashboard for his students who translate. He also sells ArchDaily DVDs year by year. And we told him, hey, please stop stealing. But then he said, ArchDaily is a very useful resource. You're presenting a lot of information that is very useful for Chinese architects. But the problem is that Chinese architects, in their majority, do not speak English. So that's why I'm doing this work. In a way, I'm helping you reach more architects. The translations are yours. And then we understood it. In the world, sometimes we see that there are these copies or these local adaptations in a more beautiful way, but they appear when there is a necessity and when someone is not addressing that necessity. So ArchDaily was very required to be in Chinese, and we were not doing it. And someone else found the opportunity, which led us to start ArchDaily in China. But this was not just because someone was doing it and we had to take that opportunity, but it's also related to the growth of China. China is going to be very soon the biggest economy in the world, and the economy has a direct relation with construction, with city development, with architecture. They are forming architects in the tens of thousands, and very quickly they are growing, and they need access to information. And today, the information, you get it through the internet. And if you start to look at this also in a bigger context, you start to understand which is the relation between the growth of ArchDaily and the growth of the world. Around that same time, this story with Wang was in 2011. And just recently, there was a big milestone in the history of the world in which more than half of the population started to live in cities. And probably the previous image of this landscape was the previous world, a more rural, but today this is the image of the city. This could be Santiago, Sao Paulo, Hong Kong, maybe from a certain angle it could be Kyiv. We're becoming much more rapidly urban. We're going to need urban environments for millions and millions of people in a very quick way. Today we are 3.3 billion people living in cities, and in only 35 more years, 3/4 of the population will live in cities. And that will be 6.6 billion people. Very simple mathematics, it's the double. So everything that is built on Earth multiplied by 2 in 35 years, which is very good for us as architects, because this is going to be mean a lot of opportunities. But the question is, where are going to be those opportunities? Because in the developed world, they are reaching a terrace in growth. Those countries are not growing so much. And as this image put it, the future of the development of the world is going to be there. There are more people living inside this circle than outside that circle. That circle is where China is, where this necessity started. In that circle we have Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. All these countries that have this rapid growth. And as you can see here, that growth is also going to happen a bit in Africa and a bit in Brazil and Mexico. But this is going to present a very different view of the world that we have. And in contrast, I told you that China was started to become very interesting for us, but interesting to the point that China is the second country that reads us the most after the US. But last week, it became the #1. So in a way, we're a tool more important for China development than for other countries. And in our top 15 of countries that use ArchDaily the most, there is India, there is Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand. Countries that really need this to be able to face this challenge. And then we understood that there is, let's say, a problem of architects in the world. Because in developed economies, there are being graduated many architects. But the opportunities are on the other side of the world. For example, in Chile, we are 17 million people and we have 12,000 architects. In the US, today, there are 200,000 registered architects for 300 million people. In China, there's around 500,000 architects for 1.3 billion people. So there is in some sides of the world an overpopulation of architects, and the job and opportunities are on the other. So for us, this become a problem of distribution. And all these things that we started to do very unconsciously, very passionate-driven, then we started to take form. Because when we understood that what we were doing was not for Chile, not for the US, but rather for all these people who will face this challenge, this started to give us a lot of direction on what we do. And actually, this gave us the mission, the shape of the mission of ArchDaily. Because as a company, you need to have a direction, you need to have a sense of purpose. And this is the mission of ArchDaily that is on the walls of all of our offices, that it is to improve the quality of life of these next 3 billion people that are going to move into cities by 2050 by providing inspiration, knowledge, and tools to the architects who will have this challenge. And you could say this is a very ambitious mission. This is very bold. And how come a group of millennials working from Santiago de Chile, playing with their phones, can think that they can impact the lives of so much people? We're lucky that in the evolution of communication, we went from speech, in which we organize ourselves to live in caves, then we were able to transmit our knowledge in print form, then we were able to see what we do from a very far distance, and then came the internet that took this to a whole new level. Today we live in the era of networks, and the whole world is super connected. Today, the issues of the world are very common to all of us. Before the era of the network, we were very disconnected of what the rest of the world was feeling. Today, we would say that thanks to Facebook, for example, we're one big consciousness. Things such as the Paris Treaty, we're all concerned about that, even if perhaps directly it doesn't affect us much. What happened here in Ukraine, we were seeing it from the distance in Chile, something that doesn't affect us in our day-to-day, but we were really feeling that. Or issues such as migration, that perhaps people in the other side of the world are thinking how I can be part of that, how I can help. So all these issues that can affect the world one way or the other, scarcity of fresh water, access to opportunities in the city, the future of energy, we all start to think in the same way on how we can deal with that. And for sure, the city is one of these. That's why a movie like this makes you realize a lot of things. Something that perhaps you thought was science fiction, what could happen if the Earth runs out of resources, is not science fiction anymore. And we even see humans that are thinking where we should find new places to continue our growth. Because the growth of the population today, that I show you those figures in relation to urbanization, you need to look at it from this perspective. If you place the years in where you have lived, you notice that it's very small. And in that time is where we have had this exponential growth of population. Thanks to the advances in medicine, thanks to advancements in food production, we as humans can grow much more faster than before. But the issue is that to support that growth, not only we need to be sustainable, because otherwise we're going to dry Earth, but also we need to live in cities in a very sustainable way. We need to understand how we're going to live in the tens of millions together. How many people live in Kyiv? 3 million. Imagine that most European cities are smaller than 2 million. Santiago, my city, is 7 million, and it is a mess. Imagine the mess that is a city like Mexico City or Beijing, where you have close to 50 million people. In China, there are cities that are younger than ArchDaily, like 10 years, and that are bigger than 10 million. And all these things are happening very fast, and it's not just on how you distribute housing, equipment, services, infrastructure. It's also how you can provide a good quality of life and how you can create a density that can spread the opportunities in a proper way. Because the cities today are the biggest source of economical growth. People are moving into cities because the opportunities are there. But we also need to understand that as we start to live more and more closer, the inequality starts to be more present. This is a photo of Sao Paulo, in which you have the rich right next to the poor, countries where there is a lot of inequality. There is a lot of anger from the people, because you see that right next to you there's people who have so much and you have so little, and this friction produces a lot of violence. Maybe you heard that in Sao Paulo or in the past in Colombia, you could get kidnapped because of this. And this is a problem that we're going to face. It is a spatial problem. The same that we continue to develop an architecture that we think it's very globalized, the glass skyscraper, and we start to disconnect from the traditional architecture that sometimes has a lower impact and is much more sustainable. And the other challenge is going to be this, that you can think this is a very bad image, or this could be a positive image, as we are going to see probably with the next lecture, but by Urban Think Tank, that are the informal settlements. A big part of this growth of the world is going to be in this form, because for the 6 billion people living in cities, 2 billion are going to be under the line of poverty. And probably all these people that are going to start these informal settlements are not going to be architects or regulators, but probably these people are going to learn a lot about proper development thanks to the internet. So this problem that we're facing for the city is about scalability. And scalability is something that we often associate with this meta place that it is Silicon Valley, all these startups that do things for billions of people. It is the place that has produced things like Uber, the biggest disruption on transport systems that was not done by a government, and also the biggest threat to the jobs of a lot of people, of taxi owners, which is a big issue here in Europe. Or Airbnb, that introduced not just a big innovation in real estate, but that also started to question the sense of ownership that we have. And then we try to understand how ArchDaily can be a tool to face this challenge of scalability for the city. And we start to think how we can provide data for the architects so they can solve their local problems and hopefully on demand. And that led us to the question of how to learn. And this has been a very big topic in our contemporary lives, because to learn was dominated by the universities that grew in a certain model, but then appeared the internet, which gives you the opportunity to learn many things in a very different way. Probably most of you have learned something thanks to YouTube videos. And probably there's a lot of people learning how to build in this way. And then when we start to think about education in relation to architecture, we try to understand what has happened historically in terms of innovation. These 4 people have changed our lives drastically. Thanks to Bill Gates, it is because we have computers in our houses and not just in research centers. Thanks to Steve Jobs, now I have all my memories in my hand with all the photos that I have taken over the years. Thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, we have become a worldwide consciousness of more than 1 billion people thinking and exchanging. And thanks to this person, we are on the verge of what virtual reality can be. His name is Palmer Luckey, and he developed something called the Oculus Rift that is making possible that we can transmit experiences through the internet, or how this magazine put it, this kid is about to change gaming, movies, TV, music, design, medicine, sex, sports, art, travel, social networks, education, and reality. But the thing is, do you know what these 4 people have in common? They didn't finish their traditional studies. They quit university to pursue their passion. And this guy, he didn't even went to high school. His parents taught him at home. But what they taught him was how to learn on himself. He was the most active person on the virtual reality forums, and he was able to make this breakthrough that was a promise that we had since the 80s true. And then we start to look, comparing this to architecture, where the masters of architecture, as we are taught today, they didn't particularly study architecture in the traditional sense. But for most of them, to travel, to see new things, was the way in which they were able to develop all these new theories. And then we think, which could be the next architecture master? Obviously, we don't know, but for sure that it is going to be someone who will come from a developing economy, who is going to have less resources, which is going to force him or her into being more innovative. He's going to be someone who learned thanks to the internet, and hopefully a user of ArchDaily. And that's why on ArchDaily, it is not just about showing projects. It's not like a stream of random things. We put a lot of effort in what we curate, because if we have the biggest distribution network for architects, we need to use it wisely. We need to start to question ourselves, which is the kind of architecture that could have the best impact in the world. We start to look into what is happening today, for example, in Southeast Asia, countries that are developing a new architectural identity and where there is a lot of innovation, but using very few resources. And we start to switch the table on how the architecture is perceived. Because now it's not just about having this fantastic cover magazine. It is about the value of this architecture. And this is being recognized by the rest of the world. Usually we hear from our users in the US that before they were seeing very few of the world. And now they are understanding how people are thinking in a much more innovative way on the other side of the world using very low resources. And in order to transmit this architecture, we also need to understand which are going to be the next ways on how we can take architectural representation further to actually transmit the experience of architecture. So we're constantly developing new ways on doing this because we're a startup. And what does it mean to be a startup? It means to be ready for change. It means to be constantly learning. But also it means to have a particular culture in which this group of 65 people can develop this, maintaining all this innovation and curiosity. And as a company, and aligned with the theme of CANactions, for us our values are very important. All the people who work at our company, we evaluate if they fit with these values because they allow us to foster an environment of teamwork where you can share with a lot of people, be in a nice place, where we can have enriching discussions, but also that we can have a lot of fun, to be happy working in our day-to-day, to be connect with the people who work from the remote offices, to have a strong culture of celebration, to play a lot of ping pong, but also to face all the issues that we can have. And being millennials, it's not just to be good at taking selfies, but it's loving what we do a lot. So this is in what we do in ArchDaily. We really love what we do. We love architecture. We love architects, and we celebrate the transformative power of architecture. If you have feedback, ideas, projects, or things, I don't know if we have time for questions, but you can send us an email to me and to David, and thank you.
Безумовно, Безумовно, в нас є час на питання, коментарі, ідеї, мрії, освідчення і заклики до революції. Працюємо за правилом піднятої руки. В кого рука піднята, до того або тієї я і підбіжу. Є. Біжу. Ну, слухайте, знали, де підняти. Передайте цьому молодому, поцільте в нього мікрофоном, будь ласка.
Thank you for this lecture, and I wanted to ask, have you heard about Jacques Fresco, and if yes, what do you think about his ideas?
About who? No, about who?
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you heard about Jacques Fresco, and what do you think about his ideas?
Jack Fresco?
Jacques Fresco.
No.
No?
I'm sorry.
Sad.
But, or maybe you can tell me what he does, but no.
Друзі і подруги, давайте піднімаємо руки, щоб я їх бачив. Є. Кидаю в вас мікрофон.
Hello. Thank you for being such a source for inspiration for us. And I have a question. There is no much comments under articles. Do you have any plans to make it like more platform for discussion? Thank you.
Well, our comments at the beginning were a very strong source of architectural debate, and it was very nice to see sometimes the architects asking the architects of the project for things, and they will answer and engage into debate, and it was very rich. And we saw a curve on the comments growing very fast, but then they started to fall. But that curve, we crossed it with how much discussion started to happen on the social networks. When we start, there were no social networks, and the discussions happened on the website. Now they are happening elsewhere, so we have had to adapt. For example, the discussions that happen on Facebook are much more rich now than what we had on the website. So that's why we even collapsed the comments on the website in order to empower the discussion on the social networks, where you have also a more controlled environment, where you have tools for authenticity. So we came to understand that the internet changed, and we had to adapt in order to be the source or the spark for the discussion, not the platform.
Hello. Have you thought about translating ArchDaily into Russian?
Well, when we saw that we had a Russian clone, we thought about that. But in a way, we have been taking these decisions for sure that China is a big responsibility that we have. And now we're committing all of our resources to make China work in a proper way and to also do what we're doing in Spanish, in English, and Portuguese. And we're trying to think what will come next. And for sure that to think of ArchDaily in other languages is what we have to do in the longer term. But today, we need to make what we're doing work in a proper way. But we're very committed to not just to, because we started to look into Eastern Europe at the beginning from Russia, but also we're understanding what is happening here, and perhaps not just to translate, but actually to have a better connection. That's why for me, the Future Architecture platform is very important, because in Western Europe, you already have a very established network of magazines, institutions, museums. And on this side, it's also very interesting, but there was not a network. And the Future Architecture platform has been very good to consolidate all these architectural institutions to give it, let's say, perhaps more presence and more power. And we are working together with them to be able to transmit what is happening here to the rest of the world, not just bringing it to here.
Hi. Thanks for this inspiring lecture. Actually, it was really interesting. And my question about data. You obviously have a lot of data, and the amount of it is growing, especially after connection with China. So, first question, are you using any data like deep learning algorithms? And if yes, what are the most recent and what are the most interesting trends in architecture can be found and you can see now from those data?
Well, we are very aware of all the scale of our data, and that as we have the biggest sample of architecture knowledge on the internet, we could turn that into actionable data. We recently, well, we're also working with a Ukrainian company called On.the.io to manage all that data because of our scale. Google Analytics is small for us. And we are also starting to understand what all the architects are looking in our website, how they are learning, and that leads us to big data. But this is something that we start very recently, late last year. Just to give you a scale, architects do more than 3 billion events per month in our platform. And what we're trying to understand how to translate that into something actionable. What you meant about trends could be of interest because we have a very diverse network, so we could start to understand that. It is a big data problem that we're starting to enter, and I hope that for later this year or for the next, that we can have that information available, but we're working with that, with data scientists, well, and with this startup here in Kyiv. But just to answer the part about the trends, we also are able to process some of this data, and we're understanding that for architects, there is a lot of value and interest from this kind of architecture that is done in more remote places where architecture started to become a new necessity. For example, Iran is a country that was very isolated and was forced to develop its own architectural identity because they were not able to import things that were very, very close, which actually was very good because what they are doing today in terms of brick is amazing. And the whole world started to get very interested in this thanks that we were able to establish a link with Iran. We're doing the same with Vietnam, with Indonesia, what they are doing with bamboo. And that is becoming a trend. I think that the worldwide architects are very interested on the ones who are really doing more with less.
Okay, thank you for lecture. Can you describe some sort of global idea, maybe your priorities, to change architect in world or to create some sort of virtual community with help of Oculus Rift in future?
Well, what I show about the Oculus Rift is very interesting because architecture is an experience. That's why architects travel a lot, because no matter how many photos or drawings or even videos you see from a space, you need to enter, you need to look at this vault, you need to see its mass. It's an experience. So these tools are allowing us to transmit those experiences. It is very new, but it is fantastic. If someone has used these things, the Samsung Gear, or the demos of the Oculus Rift in which you go into a roller coaster or you stand on the edge of a cliff, you feel something. Your body thinks that you're really doing like this or that you're about to fall. And when your brain starts to think about that, thanks to this device, maybe we can be able to transmit architecture in a different way. On the other side, there is the opportunity to transmit let's say, not real architecture, like all these simulations. Real estate quickly embraced that. But there is also the question of what is the type of architecture that we can do for these virtual places? And for sure that is not to recreate, let's say, a house and enter the house. We have the possibility to do new things. The Architectural Association is doing a lot of research into which is the architectural experience that can be created through virtual tools. But on the other hand, what we're doing in ArchDaily is that we're using 360 cameras to capture iconic buildings in Latin America and in Europe. So if you have this Samsung Gear or this Oculus, you just go to the section ArchDaily Experience, and you can start having this experience. And for sure that there's going to be a lot of development, and we're just in the beginning of that.
Здравствуйте. Хотел у вас спросить, не планируете ли вы пойти дальше и открыть свою архитектурную школу?
Такого вітання школі CANactions.
at some point we were thinking about that because we could say that we had the library, but maybe we could be more active on the teaching. And we started to analyze how the architectural curriculum is established, and we started to have these ideas about something like ArchDaily Academy. And many institutions have taken that path that started with the MOOCs, these massive online open courses, and big institutions like Harvard is putting their courses online, the MIT as well. And we know some startups in that space, and it is very particular that a lot of people are signing up, but very, very few are completing the courses. I myself sometimes take online courses and never follow them. So there is something that today is not ready, and no one has found a real answer. So instead of entering that, because we do not know how to do it, we are rather focused on other things, like what we're doing with the data. But for sure that someone needs to crack how online education can happen, but not us for now.
Hello. My question is related to what is your perception? You showed nice pictures with these concrete blocks with 30, 40-story buildings, with the new cities in China, etc. Actually, in Kyiv, we have quite the same situation with the new construction for the population. And what is your perception? You know, in 60s, in the States, in Europe, there was not very pleasant experience with this social construction, which was really like a disaster for the United States, and they turned into the low-level construction, like maybe 10, 5-story buildings. What is your perception of and the future of these new cities, let's say in 100 years? Would it not become just an uncontrolled jungles or some other kind of things, you know? Thank you.
The question of housing is a problem that we're now, in a global scale, facing through quantity. You need to give housing to a lot of people, so you need to do something modular with certain density. But today we have understood that the way that it was approaching modernism was not so good, especially in relation to how you could bring opportunities into these new developments. For sure that the density of the city, in an abstract way, is where we can have opportunities. So you want to have more people together because they are going to be closer to services, to their jobs, much more efficient transport, etc. But on the other hand, you have all the failed experiments of modernism that today are the big question. In my opinion, density is the way for the cities of the future, and we really need to find these proper ways on how we can turn infrastructure, for example, that it is the biggest investment that we do in cities, into something that is related also on how you live. For sure that this image that I show is very hard, and it is the same when you look in the Kyiv landscape, because you see all this concrete. And it is the question about the aesthetics, but it's also the question about density. On the other hand, in other contexts, for example in Africa, there is very few budget per person for urbanization. So you need to be very smart about it, because probably a big part of that is going to be informal settlement. And most important there is going to be how you do the rules, so this informal construction can start in a more controlled way and thinking about the future, and especially what people who do tactical urbanism are approaching it, to reserve spaces for public spaces in these massive areas of informal housing, because in the future, maybe you're going to have resources, but you are not going to have the space where to put a pocket square or where to put a high school. And I think that in relation to density, that is an important thing. But the thing about the aesthetics is also very important, because we need to feel good about the environment.
Thanks a lot. The most inspiring thing that you've told about is the goal of ArchDaily is to help 3 billion people. And the first question that was I heard from the person is about Jacques Fresco, it's the social architecture that proposed the alternative idea of how the humanity can grow using architecture. He proposed the resource-based economy, but one part of his idea is to build new cities. And I'm asking, it's not a question, it's, I just want a quote from you. How do you think, is it possible to build new cities? And if you can, after the presentation, just check the idea of Project Venus that was created by Jacques Fresco, because if you learn it, I think you can change the world. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you for the recommendation.
Is it necessary to build new cities?
Good question, or should we provide a better way to densify what we already have, but for sure that where this growth is going to happen, there is need for new cities, especially Southeast Asia, Africa.
You post a lot of projects of young architects, and by doing so, have you transformed some completely unknown practices into very well-known ones? And if so, what are the most significant cases?
Well, thanks to the exposure at ArchDaily, we are able to give these opportunities to other architects to be recognized, who get more work and start to build their careers. And it also happens because we have a very unbiased approach to our curation. We're very curious, we're constantly looking for new things, but always based on the quality of the work that they do. And we have something very interesting because on 2009, we started with the Building of the Year Award, because we were publishing a lot of projects, but we understood that there are some that are better than others. And when we started with this award to recognize the best projects, we understood that in the spirit of ArchDaily, we could not do it in the same way that others do, in which you have a jury that does a shortlist, and we rather rely on the power of our network. So the ArchDaily Building of the Year is a distributed system in which people from all over the world vote, and through data, they start to create clusters of the best projects and then become the finalists, and they choose the best projects. And every year, this has worked in a very good way, because we constantly monitor what it is happening to see if this goes into something positive or negative. At the beginning, the first time that we do it, we didn't know what was going to happen. But the result has consistently been super good, because usually that you will see all these famous projects by practices such as Zaha Hadid or OMA that are very good works of architecture, but also many times it is the first built work by a young architect in a place that you have no idea, in Argentina, in Paraguay, in Portugal, in Vietnam. And those cases have been very interesting because immediately you shift the aim towards what they are doing. And they are, because of the reach of ArchDaily, a lot of other media reference us. So when these architects in Portugal, who did the first one, did a prefab house, very small, but with all the details very well done, they started to be reached by a lot of media from abroad, and actually they start to sell their prefab system. So for them, this was very good. But it was not a thing of marketing, but it was just doing a very good work, and also taking the time to do all the proper representation, the photos, to share it with architects through ArchDaily.
Всем привет, добрый вечер, спасибо за лекцию. У меня такой вопрос, тут много молодых людей, которые студенты и которые уже давно выпустились. Мы когда учились, у нас была мысль организовать институт при институте и приглашать практикующих архитекторов, а не только преподавателей, чтобы они могли оценивать наши проекты и как-то консультировать нас. Вот вопрос, есть ли у вас какая-то площадка, которая может это позволить, и если нет, то будет ли она для молодых архитекторов? Такой вопрос. Спасибо.
Well, we're very focused on online. We try not to do things offline, like physical things. But what I understand is that you ask how you can connect young architects with with people who practice, who have knowledge, and to connect them. That's what you ask? And that's why we have this interview program in which we go to established firms and also young architects who are doing interesting work, and we ask them how they grow their office, how they grow their practice, advice for young architects, because we understand that this one-to-one knowledge is good to have. Today, we have seen interesting lectures, Soil, with Mark J, now with Urban Think Tank, and this is a very good way to transmit the knowledge on a like one-to-one relation or 1 to 100. And the way that we do it is through interviews, but we haven't found other way to do it. Okay.
Здравствуйте. Такой вопрос. Как ваши журналисты находят и отбирают проекты для публикаций?
Well, they are not journalists, they are architects. And what do we do? A lot of people send us emails every day, and they review projects, they do a curation. But we're also constantly scouting. We're looking architecture for places that we think that there might be something interesting. Today I have met some architects that I didn't know from before, and then I can start to enter more, for example, into the Ukrainian network of architects. And our team is very well connected. They participate in biennales, they go to architecture workshops to grow this network and to have more input. But also, sometimes we look at our map of publications and we say, for example, Iran. We knew that something was going to happen, and we start to think how we can get more projects from Iran. We already have people that read us, and what we started to do was call for submissions, but in Farsi. We started to write the things in their own language so we could establish that link, and it started to work. Our projects team, well, you saw it on the photos, they work in this big table, and they are constantly exchanging architectural information, looking, reading other websites, looking into seminars that, for example, architectural associations of other countries do, and always trying to find new information. But because they are very architecture geeks.
Ну, давайте розмістимо руки в такому положенні. І коли я скажу дякуємо, подякуємо. Отож, Девід Базульто, дякуємо вам, ArchDaily.